Welcome back to episode 3 of Keeping It Juicy. This episode is brought to you by Linda's Biscotti. Linda's Biscotti is located in Chester, New Jersey at 30 Main Street. She is actually one of the first people that I collaborated with when I started my Instagram account, Miss Chester. You can find Linda's Biscotti at Linda's Biscotti, all one word, on Instagram. And one of the main reasons why I love her in general and her biscotti, because she has hard biscotti and soft biscotti. And you'd think, well, aren't they cookies? But they're really not. There's something about them that are biscotti, and I really love the soft biscotti. She also has nut-free, dairy-free, vegan options. And if you go to her store at 30 Main Street, one of my favorite things that she has is an Oreo that's stuffed with edible raw cookie dough. And she has empanadas from somebody. She has so many different things, so I highly recommend that you stop by, and she's just a great person in general. So thank you, Linda, for sponsoring this episode. So I took a poll on both Keeping It Juicy podcast. So the Instagram for Keeping It Juicy is Keeping It Juicy podcast, and then my Instagram is Miss Chester, ms.chester_NJ. So I took a poll because I wanted to hear from you guys what you really wanted me to talk about. And what you guys said is that you want me to talk about my cancer journey and my mental health journey. Those are the two most popular. So those are the next things that I'm going to talk about. And today we're going to be talking about my cancer journey. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Caitlin O'Neill, also known as Miss Chester, and this is Keeping It Juicy. So at the age of 28, I was diagnosed with stage 3 HER2 positive breast cancer, and this journey really starts in 2007. So in 2007, around 2006, 2007, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was just finishing or going into my senior year of high school. So honestly, I don't remember all of the details because I was a brat and I was just self-involved with myself. So I don't remember every single detail, but my cancer journey starts then as well because my mother was tested and she was tested positive for the BRCA gene. And just for your information, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know all the details about everything. I'm only sharing my journey. So my mother tested positive for the BRCA gene, which there's BRCA1 and BRCA2. I honestly forget which she tested for, and I think I tested for BRCA2. So she tested positive, and when your family member tests positive, they recommend that you then test for the gene as well. So I went in, I tested, and before the results even came back, the doctor was talking to me about taking my breasts off. And of course, at the age of 16, 17, 18, that's obviously very scary. And so I cried and cried and cried, and then the test came back negative. So this was in 2007, I tested negative for the BRCA gene. So I just went on with my life, and to be fully transparent, my breasts were huge. I had a 32 double F. I have a very small rib cage. Not much else of me is small. Now my boobs are small, but before they were very large and they were very dense. So having really dense breasts gives you a higher risk of getting breast cancer as well. So it was really important for me to do self-breast exams, and it's important for all of you to do them as well, because actually they recommend that most importantly because you know the changes that are happening in your body. So if something comes up, you're going to be the one most likely to find it, just like I found my own cancer. So after my mom was diagnosed, I became very vigilant of doing self-breast exams, and you should be doing your armpit from like your elbow all the way down here. And be rubbing in circular motion, but we don't need to do that, and this isn't keeping it juicy in that way. So it's really important to do that, and so I am a workaholic. I've always been a workaholic, and so one year I did find something in my right breast, and so I went to the doctor. They did some sonograms, and they found a water bubble. So there was a large water bubble in my right breast, and so they sent me to the doctor, another doctor, to get the fluid taken out and tested. So this was in November of 2015. So I got the fluid tested, and then everything was fine. And this is in 2015. And then I continued to do my self-breast exams, and eventually I felt another lump. So I said, oh, my water bubble has, the water's come back. I need to go to the doctor. But I kept pushing off going to the doctor. Because it was just a water bubble, wasn't it? So again, I'm a workaholic, so I like to cram everything into certain days and take off only certain days. So then I went to the doctor on November 8th. I voted, went to the doctor, and I got a sonogram just like I had before. And then I got another sonogram, and another, and another. And eventually they said the doctor recommends a mammogram. And just so you know, I was 28 years old at that time, and I felt like maybe I was an adult at that time, but you still are learning, and I still, ask my parents things and all that good stuff. So I still felt like a child at heart. And so I got a mammogram, another one, another one. So at that point, I knew something was wrong. After I finished my probably 5th mammogram, they sent me into a room with a nurse, and the first thing she said to me was, "Who's here with you?" And of course, my stomach just fell to the floor. And I said, "Nobody's here with me. I have a water bubble, and I just need to get the fluid taken out just like last time." And at this point, she didn't really let anything go. She just said, there's something that they really want to look into a little bit more, and we're going to send you to a specialist. And honestly, at that point, I pretty much blacked out. I don't really remember in between going to the next doctor and what I did, who I talked to, all that kind of stuff. So I went to the second doctor, who was a breast surgeon. My mom came with me. We went into the doctor's office, and she examined me, and she said, "Oh yeah, I feel what they're talking about, and I also feel something else." And I said, shit. So what they felt in my armpit was an enlarged lymph node. So it was enlarged. What was it enlarged with? I'll be telling you that soon. So then we planned my surgery to take a biopsy of what it was. So this was in my armpit. They were taking a biopsy of what was in my armpit. So the surgery was I believe it was for the Friday before Thanksgiving. I'm not positive on that, but I'm pretty sure it was the Friday before Thanksgiving. I was obviously very scared. My mom came with me. We got it done. It wasn't that intense, that surgery, because they were just taking a small biopsy, but I do remember going into the surgical center. I believe it was on 206 in Hillsborough, and I walked in myself because it was a small, surgery center, and the feelings that are coming back to me now are crazy because you're walking into your own surgery. So then I just lay there, they put you under, love that, good stuff, and then I wake up and it's time to just wait for the results. Fast forward to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I remember I'm driving down to Somerville to meet my best friend Hillary, who is also a doctor in breast cancer research, and I get a phone call from the doctor's office, and they said, "The doctor wants to see you, can you come in?" And I said, "Why does she want to see me?" And she said, "She just wants to see you." I said, "Is it bad?" And she said, "She just wants to see you. When can you come in?" And I obviously hung up the phone, called Kim, who is my partner, also known as Mr. Chester. I called my mom and my dad and Hillary. And so I went right to my mother's house in Branchburg. I remember getting out of the car and shaking. I feel like all the feeling just left my body. And I walked up our steep driveway, and I opened the door, and I looked to the left, and Hillary and my mom are already crying, and I just fall to the floor. And when you see Hillary crying, and she's a doctorate and PhD in breast cancer research, you definitely know it's not good. So I said, let's just go. Let's get in the car. Didn't want to sit there, didn't want to talk about it, let's go. We get into the doctor's office. When I am in a mood or anything, people tend to steer clear of me. I am a Leo after all. And so I just sat there. Everyone kind of sat with themselves. Then she brought us in. The doctor came in pretty quickly. I was sitting in a chair, and I remember she was wearing black and white. She was wearing patent leather shoes. She walked in, closed the door, and I said, "It's cancer." And she said, "Yes." And I just remember falling to the floor and crying. And it was just more of a disbelief. And she went on to explain a little bit more to us. I really don't remember. And then next she I honestly don't remember what she was saying. And what I asked her was, do you have any patients my age who are going through this? And she said yes. And I said, are they still alive? And she did hesitate, and then she said yes. And I don't know if I truly believe her. So the next call was to my father, who worked at Merck for 35 years. I'm 35 years old. He really just retired last year. And I just had to tell him, Dad, I have cancer. And he said, okay, what does the doctor recommend we do? And the next call was to his buddy who he went to school with, who is now, or was, the head of research at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Because of my age, everyone was very concerned, obviously. And because I tested negative in the beginning, why is a 28-year-old girl getting breast cancer? So we got into Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. We got to see the doctor who had his name plastered against the wall, which was a good feeling. And we went right in, saw the doctor, they felt everything up, and they said, we have treatment for this. You're gonna get through this. And I was in there alone, and then we went into the sitting room, or the area, not the sitting area, but into the doctor's office, and it was me and my dad, and the doctor looked at my dad and said, she's going to be fine. And that is where I saw my dad really let everything go, and he just started to cry, and it looked like he had taken a first breath in a week. And the doctor just started to go on about like, oh, so you surf, all this kind of stuff. So the positive thing about my cancer, and there are silver linings to literally everything. Getting cancer really sucked, but I think I was meant to get cancer, and I think it made me into the person that I am today. So the silver lining to my cancer is that it's HER2 positive, so there's triple negative, there's ER positive, all these different kinds. So HER2 positive is the most aggressive cancer, but it also has one of the greatest treatments right now. So there is something called Herceptin, which I'll talk about. And so they were really confident that I was going to be okay. So they said, do you want to start chemo today? And I said, no, I do not want to start chemo today. I was just grasping the fact that I had cancer at the age of 28. And this was early December, so we got right in, and then I said, no, I don't want to start chemo, and they asked me, do I want to freeze my eggs? And they said they would have to push off chemo for a little bit, give me hormones. And I'm in the science field. Again, I'm a registered dietitian by training, so I do understand things. And I'm not even gung-ho about having kids in general, so I said, hell no. I want to, get chemo ready. I don't want to push anything off. And why would I push something off for a child that I don't even know I want to have? So that's one of the questions people always ask me, did I freeze my eggs? So fast forward to December 20th, I had my first chemotherapy treatment. It was in New York City. I remember my dad picking me up in Morristown, and I got in the car, and he was bald, but he had hair in the back. I don't know, why does the hair grow there? I don't know. And he was growing out all of his facial hair and hair in the back. He was in like a weird hippie, mode or mood. And he had a little hair tie and a little ponytail. And I got in the car on my first chemotherapy, and all of his hair was gone. He shaved his face, he shaved his head, he shaved everything. And that was just the beginning of, my dad took me to chemo a lot in the beginning. Because Kim still had to work. I was working, but I was working less, so we couldn't just stop working in general. So my dad and I went to chemotherapy for the first time together, and I remember walking in. I remember being in disbelief that I was there, and I remember sitting in the chair, and I don't have great veins, so they were trying to find a vein, poke and prod, that kind of stuff. And they had to get the senior nurse to come in, and she had to find a vein, and she eventually did, and I just sat there. I started crying, and then my dad started crying, because my thought process was, why am I sitting here putting in this toxic stuff into my body? And really the only answer is so I could survive. They started chemotherapy on me. And I believe it took about an hour, maybe 2 hours. I really don't think it was that long. My dad brought his laptop, he was working. We kind of just sat there in silence, in disbelief. I think I took a little nap because I think they gave Benadryl. They usually give you Zofran now. And to be honest, I thought I was going to be really skinny during this time. I thought I was going to be sick. There was going to be another silver lining. But chemotherapy treatment isn't what it was, 50 years ago. I thought I would be wrapped around the toilet all the time. I thought I would be really sick. I thought I would be weak. But honestly, none of that happened. I don't think I threw up once. I definitely didn't lose a pound. So they've really come a long way, which is really amazing, and this is why you should be donating to reputable sources like Memorial Sloan Kettering, because your money goes towards research and saving lives just like mine. 10 years ago, I might not have survived because they might not have had a great treatment for HER2-positive breast cancer. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, probably the same. And every day is a little bit different. They have more research, everything like that. So on December 20th, I finished my first chemotherapy. I didn't feel anything because obviously it doesn't affect you right away. So we got out, went down the stairs, walked outside, and I said, I think I'm actually hungry because I probably hadn't eaten much in the last 3 weeks. So I remember what I had. We went to a deli. I had an everything bagel with ham and cheese, like why, and a coffee. And so we got back in the car and I took a few bites of it, and then I started to feel, I think it wasn't necessarily the chemotherapy that was setting in, it was the relief and the feeling of it finally being over. And so I remember sitting in the car, taking a picture of myself laying on a blanket that I had brought, and I sent to all my family, and I said, round 1 is done. Everyone, I'm sure, had a sigh of relief. I was also blogging during this time, and in the first episode of Keeping It Juicy, I said I always had an outlet, and so during my whole chemotherapy treatment, I blogged once a week, really so my family and friends could be up to date on what's going on, because social media really wasn't what it was, and this was 7 years ago. If it was now, I would just be making reels on everything, but I wasn't doing it back then. And so chemotherapy was done. So I did 16 rounds, and I'm not going to say exactly what I did because I don't want to mess it up. I know one of them was the Red Devil. There's something called AC. But if you have any specific questions, you can always ask me, and I can ask Hillary because she knows everything. And so the first chemotherapy was done. I went home. I had a huge bruise on my arm because you can touch my arm and I would bruise, but there was a huge bruise right here in my arm, and because they were trying to find a vein. And I remember going to Christmas Eve. Mr. Chester's family has a huge Christmas Eve. I remember going to the Christmas Eve with probably 30 people, and I felt like there was a line of fire in between me and a lot of people because, of course, I don't see them all the time. But it was, the girl who has cancer at 28. What do you say to her? And she has a huge bruise on her arm. Why does she have that? So for the beginning, it was a little bit awkward, and I felt like, nobody wanted to be near me. And of course, I was in chemotherapy. Did they want to share their germs, everything like that? And eventually, we all started talking, and people were just, they were very distraught about it. They all cried when they found out that I had cancer. And they asked what they can do. And this is Christmas 7 years ago, so I can't believe it's been 7 years, which is, thank you to modern medicine for that. And, what I want to share with you is if you do know anyone who is going through cancer, or if you're a family member, you can bring them things that they want. Don't get somebody a hat. I don't know how many freaking hats I got because I was balding. Just, ask them what they need, and just listen to what they have to say, and think back of what they have, or what they love. Like Mr. Chester and I love DoorDash, so something like a DoorDash gift card would be good, or an extra cleaning for a cleaning person to come in because they're just so busy, or a ShopRite gift card, an Instacart gift card, something like that they can actually use and can actually benefit them. And so this was the beginning of my journey to fight my cancer, and this is actually going to be a two-parter because I have so much to share. So look forward to episode 5, part 2 of my cancer journey. Thank you for listening to this episode of Keeping It Juicy. You can find this episode and all the rest on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And as always, don't forget, keep it juicy.